Hello and welcome to episode 2 of The Great Movie Show. My name's Dave and I'm joined by my co-presenters Lloyd and Adam.
Hello.
Hello.
This week we'll be talking about the sci-fi classic Blade Runner directed by Ridley Scott. Loosely based on the 1968 novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, Blade Runner was originally released in the summer of 1982, months after the author died. It was Ridley Scott's follow-up to Alien. Written by Hampton Fancher and David Peoples with a working title of Dangerous Days, Blade Runner is set in a bleak, grimy, film noir future version of Los Angeles in 2019 and focuses on a former cop coming out of retirement to hunt down an escaped gang of Nexus 6 replicants, synthetic humans manufactured by the Tyrell Corporation. Harrison Ford, who plays Rick Deckard, the eponymous Blade Runner, came into the role off the back of major success in Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Other actors in the running for the main role included Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, Nick Nolte, and Burt Reynolds. The main villain of the movie, Roy Batty, the leader of the replicants, is played delightfully by Rutger Hauer. Although neither a critical or commercial success at the time, its appeal has grown over the years to the point where Blade Runner is now considered to be a sci-fi classic and the first major example of cyberpunk fiction. With an estimated budget of around $30 million, which equates to $76 million today, Blade Runner only recouped $26 million upon its initial release, struggling to compete with the likes of E.T. and Rocky III, released the same summer of 1982. It was nominated for 2 Oscars for its art and visual effects, but won neither, despite the fact that its special effects are now considered to be amongst the best of all time. The evocative soundtrack by Greek electronic musician Vangelis, also known for Chariots of Fire, was groundbreaking in its fusion of electronic music with more contemporary styles. There are 3 major versions of the movie: the 1982 theatrical release, the 1992 director's cut, and the 2007 final cut, which Ridley Scott considers to be the definitive version. It also went on to spawn the much-awaited sequel, Blade Runner 2049, released 35 years after the original. There are some significant differences between each of the versions of Blade Runner, which I'm sure we'll discuss in more detail in this week's episode of The Great Movie Show, which is entitled I've Seen Things You People Wouldn't Believe, a line from Rutger Hauer's now iconic Tears in the Rain monologue during the movie's climax on a grimy Los Angeles rooftop.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Okay, this week's first feature is called 6 Degrees. We forgot to mention it in last week's show. You may have heard of the famous game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's essentially the same thing. We're going to link from the previous week's movie to this week's movie, jumping from one actor to the next through shared movies that both actors were in. So obviously last week's movie was Die Hard. This week's movie is Blade Runner. So we're going to go through myself, Lloyd, and Adam. We're going to find out how we've all decided to jump from last week's movie to this week's movie. So over to you, Lloyd.
Yes. So I kind of themed it with a film I believe is heavily influenced by Blade Runner. There's only one step to this. It loses the sort of noir aspect, but a lot of the technology and the world and the universe in which they're operating, I believe, it's really, a lot of it is inspired by it. It was directed by Luc Besson, and it's the Fifth Element. So we've got Bruce Willis from Die Hard. Bruce Willis was in the Fifth Element, where the cars are basically lifted directly from Blade Runner, the massive apartment blocks where everyone's living. It seems a bit of a brighter world, but yeah, a lot of the tech in there. The feel's completely different, granted, but a lot of things were lifted straight from it. So we've got Bruce Willis, Die Hard to Fifth Element. Then we've got Brian James, Fifth Element. He was Monroe. He was one of the army chaps at the beginning. And he's obviously Leon Kowalski in Blade Runner.
Well, I went obviously a traditional way from a great action movie to a neo-noir classic by the theme of 1980s comedy movies.
Okay. So, let me just stop you there. Then we may have some similar ones between us then in that case, but carry on. Sorry.
I realised that Carl Godunov, Alexander Godunov, who plays Carl, is Max in the Money Pit with Tom Hanks and Shelley Long. And I was thinking there's loads of different links with Tom Hanks and a number of actors on both sides, but I wanted to do it the traditional 6 steps. So I was thinking about Art Shirk, who's in there, the Shirk brothers who fix the house or don't fix the house particularly quickly, and that's played by Joe Mantegna. He's also in, I think, CSI, and he plays Harry Flugelman in The Three Amigos.
Right.
Also in The Three Amigos is Chevy Chase playing Dusty Bottoms. And then I moved from Chevy Chase to Emmett Fitzhume. You might remember him being in Spies Like Us with Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd played Austin Milbarge, I think it was. A feature that will often come up in this particular show, I imagine, is Ghostbusters. We've got Ray Stantz, Dan Aykroyd in Ghostbusters, and then Peter Venkman, played by Bill Murray. And the main reason I wanted to get to Bill Murray is I wanted to get to John Winger in Stripes, because Stripes, when I was younger, was actually one of my favourite movies. I tried to get there with John Candy, and you can do it through National Lampoons, which he starred in with Chevy Chase. But I decided to do it using Stripes, so we could go to Louise. Sean Young plays Louise in Stripes, and of course, Sean Young is also Rachel in Blade Runner.
Okay, so mine there's some similar themes to the way you did yours. I would say, Adam, there was some similar kind of plot lines that I considered. I certainly made a note of Stripes and that connection there, but I didn't end up using it. So, and I also, me being me, I didn't want to go from the major actor in either of the movies. I didn't want to go from Bruce Willis to Harrison Ford, if you know what I mean. I wanted to kind of stay with some of the more minor roles. So I started with Reginald Val Johnson in Die Hard.
You said that again.
Yeah, I said it the same as last week. Reginald Val Johnson in Die Hard, who's obviously also in Ghostbusters, as we talked about. Yeah. From where I pick up Rick Moranis, who's in Spaceballs. He's in Spaceballs with John Candy, who's in National Lampoon's Vacation, with Eugene Levy, who's in Splash, with Daryl Hannah, who plays Pris in Blade Runner. So to summarise, I went Die Hard, Reginald Val Johnson, Ghostbusters, Rick Moranis, Spaceballs, John Candy, National Lampoon's Vacation, Eugene Levy, Splash, Daryl Hannah, and then we're into Blade Runner. So 6 different movies, including Die Hard and Blade Runner. That makes sense. And we probably need to come up with a consistent way of expressing this.
Yeah. And we all know the one film that links even faster than Lloyd's Luke Besson one is Expendables, isn't it?
Yeah,
Expendables 3.
Yeah. Only because Harrison Ford Bruce Willis was sacked and replaced by Harrison Ford. Is that what happened?
Yeah, apparently. Although I don't know how true this is, apparently Bruce Willis was charging $1 million a day for his time, so they just said we don't need you anymore.
That feature's currently called 6 Degrees. We probably could do with a better name than that. If anyone's got any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Okay, so now moving back to the main topic of this week's show, which is Blade Runner. Obviously, in last week's episode, Die Hard, I'd never seen Die Hard, so the focus was really on me, about my first impressions. Blade Runner is slightly different in that we have all seen it previously, but I understand that one of us has seen it less than the others. So do you want to say something about that, Lloyd?
Yeah, so obviously I've seen it at some point. It's a classic movie. It was released when we were, 3, something like that. So it's kind of been there when we've come of age and started seeking out good movies. We've all come across, haven't we? So, but I've watched it a couple of times, probably 20 years ago. In fact, I remember owning it on DVD. But I just never really paid that much attention to it. And I can't remember. I can remember the rough storyline. I can't remember some of the major points. And I couldn't really look back on any scene that was memorable to me at the time. And I've tried to watch it since. But it's just one of those where it's so niche in the type of film it is. You got to be in the right mood, the right situation. It's not something that Emma would want to watch with me. So I've either got to watch it late at night, where I found I've fallen asleep a couple of times, or just watching it in segments, which doesn't do the film justice. That's kind of what you do as a dad as well. You just watch bits in segments and just link it all together after the fact. But it doesn't. The film needs to flow. It needs to be. You need to build it up and experience the whole thing as it builds. So I realised that it's a big gap in my recent movie watches. So I've gone back and revisited it, and I've since watched the theatrical release, and also I found I had the final cut on Blu-ray in my Blu-ray collection. So I must have bought that at some point with the intention to watch it, and then it's just sat there for however many years, just without the opportunity.
Okay, so this week we might as well go around the room, so to speak. I've watched the theatrical release and final cut. You've watched the same, Lloyd, as you just said.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Adam, you're bringing director's cut to the table as well. Did you rewatch it this week?
Yeah, I only watched about half of it. I've seen director's cut a few times. I rewatched the theatrical. I actually watched the theatrical cut on one screen whilst simultaneously watching final cut to see how much there were in terms of differences. It's quite interesting if you remember the director's cut to see how it's changed to the director's cut, and a lot has changed back to the final cut. Obviously, still lots of differences between the theatrical and the final cut. But there's that. And I've also watched Blade Runner 2049, which I hadn't seen until day before yesterday. I don't know what it was about that either. But I was really impressed with the follow-up or the sequel, however you want to call it.
No spoilers on that, please, because I've, again, just going back to what I was saying about watching Blade Runner, I've had Blade Runner 2049 there for a while now, and again, I've seen the first half an hour probably about 7 times so far, and I didn't want to
maybe
watch this
some spoilers to explain some of the stuff.
Yeah. So there's a couple of bits at the start which I can, even with my limited knowledge of the original films, because I hadn't watched them recently. When watching Blade Runner 2049, I was able to piece it back to the original. But I've just watched the first half an hour, and I want to watch that in one go, which I will do at some point. But 7 times I've tried to watch it, and I've either been interrupted or something's happened. So don't give too much away if it's going to detract from my watch. Okay.
So for the purposes of when I'm talking today, I'm going to be calling out differences between theatrical version and final cut, but feel free to interject, Adam, if you can add something about the director's cut that's different again. So I guess first question to you, Lloyd, would be which version of the movie did you prefer and for what reason? If you did have a preference.
Yeah. Do you know what? I preferred the final cut because the voiceover was gone.
Okay.
I didn't like a couple of other bits, or one main sort of addition to the final cut. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the first thing, the voiceover, I get it from the original because it's that film noir with a detective. You know, it was one of those weeks where everything was going wrong. I had this bad case and and one of those, and it kind of fit into that. But at the same time, listening to it, it sounded like Harrison Ford just did not give a monkeys about doing it. It was. I don't.
That's totally true. That's totally true. Right. He was dead against the idea of doing a voiceover.
Okay.
As was Ridley Scott. It was forced upon them by the studio executives or the producers that watched the movie. He said it was a confusing mess. No one could follow what was going on, and they forced him to do a voiceover. Harrison Ford basically did it with a gun to his head. He went and spent a couple of days in the studio with some guy he'd never met before. He was basically writing this voiceover on the fly. And I agree what you're saying about the film noir vibe, but I think to me it comes across he was really disinterested, like you said, I think.
Definitely. Absolutely, David. So Harrison Ford's an amazing actor. I don't know what his voice acting's like. I don't know if he's done any animation films off the top of my head. In fact, he has. He did Secret Life of Pets too. So he knows how to, deliver his acting prowess through just voice. But it wasn't. I know Deckard's dry, and it's he's considered, but it just sounded like he was like just disinterested.
It's a completely different voice. It's a completely different voice. Yeah. He delivers a voiceover in a completely different voice. And I almost think he did it so badly in order to try and sabotage so that they actually wouldn't use it. That's my view.
It's crazy that I purposely I wanted to just like absorb the films, and I have some weird sort of points of view on films, so I wanted to do that, and I purposely not looked at anything else, like any Google theories or any. I haven't watched the documentary, Dangerous Days documentary, or anything like that. But I remember I was just watching it and just thinking, and I couldn't remember this from 20 years ago, but the other day when I watched it from start to finish, gave it the attention it deserved, and it was just I didn't know if he was just being really poor at it or if he just was really just so like completely like miffed off with completely doing it and then bringing that across in his performance.
What I didn't quite understand is what the studio thought it was really adding. I can see how they thought it was trying to remind the viewer of something or tease out something which we'd already seen, which maybe they thought people hadn't realized. But beyond referring to an ex-wife, which at no point appears in the movie otherwise, I don't see what it adds in terms of backstory or additional information that you can't learn from the film with certainly one watch, but any more than that.
Yeah, it's like the first voiceover is at the noodle bar, isn't he? And it's kind of just, it's given I was a cop and I retired and then I was this, and it's like, do we need that really? And it detracts a little bit from the scene. It's all this amazing soundstage. Well, actually, it was in the open air, wasn't it? With the rain coming down and so many extras and all these things going on, and you just hear his voiceover, and it was very simplistic as well. And there was some stuff we didn't need. You saying there, Dave, there's some fella writing it as he was reading it. There was a bit about Gaff saying he was brown nosing because he was after promotion, so he wouldn't care about X, Y, and Z. It's like, this adds zero to the film.
Yeah,
it's not giving me anything whatsoever.
I think that was probably important to create a tension between him and Gaff, which perhaps isn't completely evident, which is necessary for later on in the movie when, as we'll go on to talk about, Gaff was basically trying to insinuate to the audience that Deckard's a replicant, isn't he? Which you may not have picked up on, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I did in Final Cut. In the original, no.
The unicorn stuff, I mean, we'll talk about.
Yeah, but there's no other. I know unicorn's mythical, and you got the origami one at the end.
Yeah,
but you haven't got the shot of him dreaming of her or thinking of him. He's got this weird memory of a unicorn. You know, you haven't got that in the original theatrical.
No.
My view on that is if you have to presuppose that the unicorn implant is unique to Deckard, because if it's an implant in some or all replicants, then it could just be a message about him running off with a replicant.
Well, yeah, I saw it when I was watching the theatrical one without the memory of the unicorn, where Gaff's been to the apartment and Harrison Ford knows he's been there, but he's not killed Rachel because Rachel's there. And he's kind of just giving his blessing, like, basically, I ain't going to follow you. You know, I've been here, I know she's there. It's almost like, giving his blessing to Deckard. It's like, it's just a calling card, isn't it?
There are kind of better suggestions by Gaff over and above the unicorn, I think. He said something like, you did it like a man. And the way he delivers that line, you could imply more that was him suggesting he's not a man than the unicorn. But I'm sure there's a few things that we can talk about in terms of that particular sort of theme.
Yeah, sure. But so back to your question, Dave. I preferred the Final Cut because it lost the voiceover. There's nice little bits there as well. There's a few seconds of lingering looks and lack of dialogue where you just kind of sense in the vibe or the tension in the scene.
Atmospheric.
Within the original cut, that nice few seconds with no dialogue, maybe even 7-8 seconds, but nothing's really happening. You've got a voiceover filling it, so you lose a little bit of that tension from the visuals and from what's actually happening. I didn't like. I don't know. I interpret the movie a certain way, and I didn't like the unicorn memory. I know Ridley wanted it in, but I didn't like it. So that's the one aspect of the final cut I didn't like.
Okay. I want to ask you and Adam, I suppose, and it's hard to say now in hindsight, but do you think that you would have understood if you'd never seen the theatrical release? Do you think the final cut would still have made sense? Do you think the voiceover gives anything in terms of providing?
The voiceover just makes it a very simplistic A to B to C, and it detracts from what the film is. It's an amazing masterpiece where you don't need that simplification, which is what the voiceover is, and it makes it feel a very short film with the voiceover because it's spelled out to you what's happening. You're not drawing the dots in your head, and it's a very, very clear. It just feels short. It's set piece to set piece to set piece to ending. With these. Whereas the final cut, you're thinking, right, what's going on here? Why is that? And you're actually piecing it together yourself, which is almost like reading a book, isn't it? Where you're piecing it together and picturing in your head, and it's affording you the ability to do that. I think with the final cut, so I would have known what was going on. I would have pieced it together anyway. I don't think the voiceover just makes it very simple, and people who might not have understood the movie watching it without, it gives them a passport to enjoy it basically. But to us, where we like to just absorb the film and and follow it all through and think about what's going on, I would have understood it definitely.
No, I think it kind of undoes the intelligence of the film having things explained back to you. That part of the film is you not knowing something and you trying to figure it out, and the fact that different people talk about it and come to different conclusions is kind of the point of the film on some levels. And I'm sure Dave, you'll start talking about at some point. One actor says definitely not a replicant, director says this, writer or screenwriter says another. The fact that there's not actually any particular framework even in the production allows the viewer to draw their own conclusions. And I think the problem with the way in which the theatrical version deals with it, and the ending as well, which I'm sure you'll come to, it kind of destroys some of that kind of thought process. And it's like I think Lloyd sort of touched on it, the sort of space between things is quite important from a pacing perspective. I think of something like Dances with Wolves. If you put a sardonic voiceover at some of those points when you've got those sprawling views, it would just sort of undermine the whole point of it to me.
Dances with Wolves has got voiceover though, hasn't it?
I know, that's why I was being ironic.
But in the right places. It's not just
done properly, done by somebody who wants to do it and by a director who wants it to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And it worked well. But so it does it almost makes it feel like it's dumbed down by having the voiceover.
Yeah, I think that the studio possibly thought they had the next Star Wars on their hands, which it wasn't, and they panicked and wanted to have more mass appeal, I think. Yeah. Or make it more accessible, something like that. I'm not sure. I saw an interview with Ridley Scott in which he said that he agreed to it. But I think the alternative was they pulled the plug on the movie. So there wasn't really a choice to make, to be honest.
No.
He always hated it, and that's why he took it out once he got creative control of it.
Was that back in the time when Ridley Scott looked like Bryan Cranston?
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, talking about the other differences, I suppose, between the theatrical version and the final cut. Are there any others that you remember or took a note of for whatever reason?
I think I noticed one, but I could probably be wrong. There was a couple of bits when I was watching going, did I see that in the original? When Leon is getting interviewed by that first Blade Runner, Holden, at Tyrell.
Yeah.
There's a shot from outside the pyramid of the windows. Right. Okay. And it's as if they've got the special effects to do it then. I couldn't remember that from the original, but I'll have to go back and rewatch the original now.
I think that's the same side by side. I think the first thing I noticed was about possibly even the voiceover 8 minutes in was the first proper change that I noticed watching them side by side. Obviously the ending's different.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I was really annoyed about when I rewatched the theatrical version, which is the first goof or I think it's a major goof. When Leon knocks on effectively the phone box that Roy Batty's in, you know, the big reveal of you first see Roy for the first time. It's actually the shot from when he's with Tyrell at the end. Because if you look carefully, you can actually see Tyrell's thumb, you know, when he's sort of just like got his hand on him at the end of the movie, as in, you know, my son kind of scenario. You can actually see the thumb. So they've just used that, and I think they reversed the shot, if you know what I mean. So they use, you know, the reverse side footage, but they either zoom in or crop it or something, and you can't see it on the final cut version. But it's well worth watching. 5 minutes into the movie.
Never noticed that. Okay.
I'll tell you what I made a note of, because I noted this watching the original, and then I thought, right, let's just double check. So when I was watching Final Cut, I listened very intently again, and they changed it in the Final Cut. So he goes in to see, Bryant takes him in, or Gaff takes him in to see Bryant. So Deckard's there, and it's like, right, I've got these 4 skin jobs on Earth. And he's talking about, we found this shuttle, 6 of them had escaped, killed these people on the shuttle. They've come down. They've actually tried to infiltrate Tyrell. So 6 of them infiltrating. One of them got fried running through an electricity field or something like that. And now we've got 4 left. So that adds up to 5, obviously.
Famous goof.
Yeah. So in the Final Cut, Bryant actually says, and I think I checked, he was off screen, so they've just changed the...
Two of them got fried.
Yeah, 2 got fried running through the electricity field.
Do you want to know why that is?
Sorry?
So one of the other actresses that auditioned for the role of Pris but didn't get it, they offered her the role of a replicant, and she would have filmed scenes showing her death, but they ran out of time and money and ran out of time in the schedule, so they had to cut those scenes. But they must have already have shot the scenes in which those numbers were used earlier on.
But he shot the scene saying 6, one's got fried, and there's 4 left. So that was already a misnomer of...
Oh, right.
Maybe they're just going to use her as running through the...
Just poor maths.
But they changed it anyway to, 2 got fried. Because it was 3 guys, 3 girls.
Yeah.
And then 2 got fried, so it would have been 1 guy, 1 girl.
Okay. Good spot.
So I noticed that, and but they picked up. And obviously, there's when he's falling asleep when he's just on the piano, hitting that one note. And he has the image, the memory of the unicorn running through. I hate it.
I think you mentioned earlier, you seem to understand the significance of the unicorn.
I pieced it together with the origami at the end. Yeah,
it's Gaff's way of saying I know, but does he know? He doesn't know, but it's a hint, it's a suggestion.
It's like, to me, this seems like it was never intended by Ridley Scott to have it that way. It's like Lucas, when George Lucas is doing all these other Star Wars films, I always intended it to be this way, and it was always going to be linked up, and it wasn't. He's just based on the back of a fag packet, doing the new movie, linking everything up, and it feels as if that's what's happened here.
It wasn't new footage though. The footage was always shot at the time. He didn't film it 20 years later and put it into the final cut. It was just taken out.
When he filmed the unicorn?
The unicorn scene,
okay.
It was filmed as...
If he intended that way, I take it back, because it does obviously link up to it. But without it, watching the original, it's basically just another origami piece, isn't it, by Gaff?
Is that actually the... was that unicorn footage? I know it's not a real unicorn before you have a go at me. Was that shot? Was that shot for that film?
Was that shot in Narnia?
No, well, no, you joke. No, because you joke. Because I was thinking it looked like. Do you remember Legends that Ridley Scott did with Tim Curry and Tom Cruise? Yeah. And I thought I haven't watched it since, so I can't remember. But I thought that there was a unicorn. There's obviously unicorns in that because it's about the alicorn removal and about
there is. And Ridley Scott addresses it in one of the documentaries. I think he tries to kind of say that it's been speculated that was shot for another movie, but it wasn't. Yeah. I think he said test footage, though. It might have been test footage, but he ended up using it anyway.
But I was reading, Dave, that Philip K. Dick definitely had Deckard as a human, and that the only reason why this arose that he might be a replicant was apparently Fancher and the other screenwriter they were going backwards and forwards with some ideas, and then one misunderstood what the other one had said and thought he was saying something along the lines of, "Are you a replicant?" And I got the impression from that bit of information that maybe they built in that ambiguity a bit more into the screenplay. And maybe Ridley Scott's taken it that one step further and said, yeah, he is a replicant.
It shows screenwriting and stuff like they just come up with these stupid things because, like Deckard's situation, the replicants are purely for slave labor, where it's too risky to have a human, like exploration into deep space or doing proper like dangerous tasks. And so they'd have one, put him in a cop's position where he does a full cop's career, retires to be a Blade Runner, retires again, and he's just like pottering around. And they've let a replicant do that, paying him a pension.
Well,
it just doesn't sit. Plus, Tyrell, his experiment with these fake memories to make the replicant think they were real was Rachel, and Tyrell says that himself.
Yeah,
Rachel was the big experiment. So he's also done he's done Deckard as an experiment 10 years ago.
Well, that would be the fan theory, I think, wouldn't it?
Oh, it doesn't even make sense. It's just such a ridiculous idea. Well, not an idea, because obviously there's lots of things which link Deckard to being a replicant. But it's just these stupid things they put into movies to make it a bit more. I don't know. I get a bit annoyed when I think about this.
I think you're right.
I don't know why.
I think Hampton Fancher is adamant that Deckard is not a replicant and always has been, but because he actually co-wrote it with David Peoples, but they never actually sat in the same room. They were writing
Peoples rewrote, didn't he?
But independently. Yeah, so you're right. Somewhere along the line, that ambiguity slipped in, and Fancher didn't address it, and Ridley Scott went with it. But
what does annoy me in terms of replicants for Deckard, I noticed that all the replicants seem to get a sort of cat's eye retina effect during the movie, and then Deckard got one. I didn't notice it in the final cut again, but in the original theatrical cut, when he's in his apartment, he gets a cat's eye effect. So I was like, oh, for God's sake.
Does he though?
But not in focus. Not in focus.
He's intentionally
he's in the background.
Yeah, it's ambiguous. Even that's ambiguous. It's not definitive.
I don't remember it being out of focus. I remember seeing it quite clearly.
Yeah, he's in the background whilst she's definitely red-eyed.
Yeah, it's worth talking about the word replicant. For me, the word replicant almost feels like reptile or reptilian or lizard or something, or somebody that can, duplicate themselves, or as you said, are a duplication. But the term replicant was never in the original novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? It was something that Ridley Scott came up with because he just didn't want to use the word android. He thought it would have been used to death, maybe trying to distance himself or distance Blade Runner from Alien in that respect. I don't know. Oh, so they coined that phrase specifically for the movie.
Talking about that, I picked up on something, but it's not 100%. It felt there was a couple of shots, cityscape shots, where it felt a bit H.R. Giger-ish towards the end. Right. Like there was a bit where Deckard's on the balcony. It's like a softened Giger effect. But there was a shot towards the end, like the third act, and it was outside, and I felt this was a bit more Giger. And then there was a pillar with like an orb, like with swirling design on it, which I thought almost looks like an alien egg as well, which is probably just completely coincidental.
Right. There's a story about those pillars. There's a story about those pillars. Right. They were used in one scene, I think, in the Tyrell offices where Rachel is.
The pillars I'm talking about
outside of the Bradbury building. The pillars, and they're the right way around. But Ridley Scott really liked them and wanted to reuse them, so he got them to turn them upside down for one of those internal shots in Tyrell Corporation.
All right, cool.
Okay. And the special effects people were like, "Dude, are you serious? You want us to do this?" And he said, "Yeah."
Did you think the bad overdub with is he called the snake maker? Is it Abdul, the snake maker guy? And behind the glass, and none of the dialogue is consistent with who's talking at the time. Right. And I looked, and I think it's exactly the same. I think it's wrong on both the theatrical cut and on the final cut.
No, they corrected it. They corrected it, and do you know how they corrected it?
No.
This is amazing. They actually got Harrison Ford's son Ben in to do green screen and redo the lines, and they basically put his facial features out and superimposed it on his dad. They were both age 40 at the time when Harrison filmed Blade Runner and Ben redid that part for Blade Runner. And they even
Right.
put a fake scar on his face, the same as what his dad's got.
Did you think that scene when he's going in to see the Egyptian snake handler, whatever you'd call it, snake salesman? He taps on the glass, didn't he? I wasn't sure if they can do a link to Raiders of the Lost Ark, as if it was going to be a hooded cobra in there or something, behind the glass. But it didn't move anyway. He taps on it.
Did you notice as well the difference between the two cuts, the photograph of Zora as well? It's a subtle one that it wasn't. Is it Joanna Cassidy?
Every time I watched it, and he'd do that, pan left, whatever, zoom in, and he'd go around the corner.
Goes around the corner in the photo.
I'd always go, who is that in the photograph? What's the relevance of that person to the plot? I just didn't get what it was.
I clicked on that Zora, but only because of the kind of that point of the movie, the way it was
clearly
flown.
not here in the photo.
The fact that Leon likes collecting photos, and that's a bit of a symbolistic thing they talk about. Photos being put, but what's interesting is Rachel's got photos that have been sort of given to her as a sort of manufactured memory, but Leon's got current photos to preserve his actual memories, if that makes sense. So, and I thought that was quite interesting that he was sort of developing, and they've only been there a week or two, but it's still very important. And I think, Roy says your precious photo. Did you get your precious photos? So he's still, he'd only been there for less than 2 weeks, and he still wanted to go back and get that handful of photos because they were important to him. I thought that was quite an interesting issue, and also obviously a photo replicating a moment in time. Maybe that was sort of another symbolistic sort of aspect of the film.
Yeah.
I just wanted to call out a couple of other kind of significant differences between the theatrical release and final cut that you might, I don't know if you noticed or not. So I think quite famously, the scene where Zora gets shot and she's flailing and crashing through all that glass. It's really obviously not her during those glass
in the
scenes.
original,
It's a stunt woman with a really terrible wig on. So similar to what they did with Benford, they actually got the original actress in, and they basically had to match up the footage. They filmed her face trying to be in the same position as she was in the original shots, and they ended up superimposing it. So if you go back and watch it now, you might notice that it actually, it is the actress in those scenes. Oh, when talking about Zora, there's another one when she's in the shape, when Deckard's doing that silly voice and pretending to be from some organisation, and she's getting dressed and she puts boots up.
And the Department of Moral Values.
She puts her knee-high boots up when she's tying them, and it's got a big heel on it. Yet when she's running away, the boots have got no heel on them. So that's another continuity error.
Okay, Pop Quiz Hotshot. In what other movie does Harrison Ford do a stupid voice?
I don't know.
It's one of the Indiana Jones ones. Yeah.
Last Crusade, isn't it?
Yeah. I can't remember the line. I was hoping you'd remember it. When he goes to the castle to rescue his dad, and he puts on a Scottish accent and then sneezes on the guard.
Okay, well, you can do that for us later, Lloyd.
We've come to see the tapestries. That one. We're here to see the tapestries.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, nice little segue. Okay, and the last major change.
So sarcastic, Dave. Nice little segue, idiots.
Okay, the last major change between theatrical and final cut, which certainly I noticed this time around. I'll be honest, I didn't notice it previously. I don't know why. I guess because I'd watched the theatrical and final cut so close together this time. Is the line when Roy goes to visit Tyrell to ask if he can have his life extended effectively, and then he murders him. Spoiler alert. And he says in the theatrical release, the line was, I'm not going to say the word, but in the theatrical release, it was, I want more life, effer. Yeah, in the final cut, they changed that line to, I want more life, father, which works a lot better, actually. The swear word kind of, I guess they're kind of resonant in different ways, but I think it worked better with the word father instead. Anyway, a bit more shocking, I suppose, with the other version.
He was meeting his maker, he was meeting his god or his father or all those things, but he was also enraged by him. And in a weird sort of way, it's quite nice that we've got both those versions, because one shows his kind of respect, is it maybe? And the other one shows his just disdain for him. which
Yeah.
you get in the killing scene. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if you took the same as me, but the moment that he kills Tyrell, he's not happy, he's not comfortable, he's excruciatingly uncomfortable, but enraged. Or it's such a good acting scene. There must be about 6 different emotions all on his face all at the same time, just in that short period of time.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking as well is with Roy Batty, he's not a cold-blooded murderer. Yes, he's out of control because he's trying to get to his objective. There's no need for him to kill Jeff Sebastian.
No, I thought as well.
He's running off. Roy's going to go and carry on with his little mission and go and, go back to the apartment, wherever, and wait for Deckard. But, go back and see Pris. But then Jeff Sebastian runs off. Then you hear on the radio, body found with Tyrell, 25-year-old. And I was like, I don't know. He went down in my estimation for that because that didn't seem like part of him.
And both Pris and Roy Batty seem to really like him and understand him. And, there's that symbolistic thing, wasn't there, as well, with him having that similar degenerative disease. And sort of, they both have shortened lifespans. And I agree, Lloyd. I thought actually, in a way, it would have shown some interesting level of humanity that he let him live, but I wonder whether they wanted that humanity to be just reserved for Deckard at the end.
He went down. He's a very complex and impressive character, Roy Batty, and and Rutger Hauer did an amazing job getting everything across. And you let yourself down, you let the movie down, you let your family down. It just felt like that. It's just like there's no need, and I don't know if that's just being human, the human element of me thinking and feeling sorry for the guy who did nothing but help. He killed it was the end bit. It's the end, the final act. So he's killed Jeff Sebastian, and then Deckard gets his address and goes there. And Pris is waiting, isn't she? Pretend with that veil over her head.
Right, okay.
The final
so
bit.
It's had to set up the confrontation with Pris then.
It does, but why would Rutger Hauer want to send him to his girlfriend? Because he obviously had something going with. It seemed like they had a connection, and I believe Leon had a connection with Zora.
Zora.
Where are you getting this from?
The way he kissed her.
Just a vibe.
The way he kissed her tongue.
Yeah, I guess so.
He was very upset about all of them when they were dying one by one, but he seemed to just have more of a romantic thing with Pris. And the way that he kissed her when he arrived at Jeff Sebastian's, where she went, "This is my friend Roy." Kissed her then when she was dead, and she had the tongue. When she was dead, he sort of kissed the tongue as well. So that just seemed a bit more than he seemed friends with them all, and he was genuinely upset when his crew were getting killed. But he seemed to be romantically entwined with her, and Leon just seemed to take an interest in Zora, the way he had a photo of her as well, which led to one of my favourite bits. I don't know if it's my favourite bit. Is the fight with Deckard and Leon after he's killed Zora, because he just grabs him and properly manhandles Deckard, pushes him, and he just goes, "Oh, Leon," like that, and he whacks him again, and he's just. It's typical Harrison Ford. Same with the reluctant hero, almost taking a bit of a pasting. He's properly getting punched really hard, whatever. Which you see in the next scene with Rachel. But there was an element of sort of not necessarily comedy, but close to it for me, while still in the feel of the movie, which I really liked. I really did like that fight.
Leon, how old am I? I don't know.
And then obviously Rachel comes along and.
Do you know as well? There's a falsely referenced goof in that fight. When he's thrown onto the car, the windscreen's already slightly broken.
Right.
So people have called that as a goof, but apparently I think it was the screenwriter or the cinematographer, somebody, I might be wrong, basically said no, it was like a disused, broken vehicle anyway. And him landing on it, it wasn't to wreck a perfect vehicle. It was already broken. But I love that line. The "wake up, time to die." I think that's such a brilliant line.
Yeah, it is. And then it's obviously Roy in the final scene as well says the same thing. Time to die.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah.
And then with the dove. But yeah, I do like that fight with Harrison Ford and Leon. And then I love the attention to detail. Deckard's taken a pasting, which is another thing which says what the replicants, especially if you're going to make a replicant that's a cop, why hasn't he got this extra strength, superhuman strength and ability to withstand these punches and things? He's getting thrown around like a ragdoll. But anyway, he goes back to his apartment and he pours himself a vodka. Even though they seem to drink Johnny Walker Black all the way through the movie, he pours himself like this vodka. And he takes a little bit of a quarter sip of it, and then blood feeds back into the.
I think that's brilliant.
It's absolutely. I just thought that's such a great attention to detail, because then the subtlety goes in a few minutes when he's above the sink like that, blood coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
And then falls asleep like Adam falls asleep when he's had a drink.
Yeah, I was wanting to just touch briefly on Philip K. Dick, who, as I mentioned in the introduction, wrote the original novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the Blade Runner is based on. The
title doesn't work, does it, for the book? Because humans don't dream of sheep. Humans count sheep to get to sleep. Do humans dream of sheep? No, humans count sheep to get to sleep. So it'd be, do androids count sheep, electric sheep, to get to sleep? Wouldn't it?
So that again, work three times.
For such an intellectual man, the title doesn't work.
But I mean, you mentioned the title of the novel. The actual title of the movie, Blade Runner, it's not actually in the original novel. There's no concept or name Blade Runner. It was just something that Hampton Fancher, who wrote the screenplay, he saw the title. It was a title. There was another novel, a completely different novel with that title, 1974 novel called The Blade Runner, and he just really liked the name. So he convinced Ridley Scott to go and buy the rights to it so they could call their movie Blade Runner, but it's not mentioned in the original book or anything.
It was somebody who sold surgical instruments or something like that on the sly.
It's something like in the future. Basically, there's an underground network for people smuggling and selling medical stuff on the black market.
Well, this speaks to my thought as well, because the term Blade Runner, not being one word, so it's not colloquialism for calling something. It's formed with a noun and a verb. So a blade runner. So it's as if, have you got other runners? So is the blade referring to replicants? And the runner is the fact you're chasing them down. So the fact it's two words as opposed to one word, Blade Runner, it's Blade Runner. That sort of didn't make much sense to me, but it does in terms of that novel, doesn't it? Because he's the Blade Runner. He runs blades illegally. So maybe in my head, they should have made it one word, and then you've got the colloquial phrase for someone who chases down the replicants and retires them.
Yeah, so I think it was you. It was you, Lloyd, that said you weren't really aware of anything else that Philip K. Dick had written.
I haven't seen anything else. So there's, I know there's no, I haven't. I haven't seen
your favourite films.
All right, I haven't seen A Scanner Darkly, and I haven't seen The Man.
2 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
All right, did Total Recall? Did he?
Yeah.
What was the book called then?
The book. So, funnily enough, most of the famous adaptations, with the exception of these first two, Blade Runner and Total Recall, the other famous ones, to my mind, Minority Report, Paycheck, A Scanner Darkly, and The Adjustment Bureau, they were all pretty much named after the original books.
Okay.
I mean, The Adjustment Bureau was called The Adjustment Team, and Minority Report was called The Minority Report. Total Recall was called We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. It was written in 1966, actually, which is a very long time ago to be writing, something that kind of, I don't know what the word is, just Philip K. Dick's vision of the future just seems to be like really prescient, if that's the right word. It's like, how could he have dreamed of these things back then?
Almost like an Arthur C. Clarke, isn't he?
It's just on a different. I love all the movies that have got anything to do with Philip K. Dick, and weirdly, I've not even bothered my ass to go and read any of the books either.
Have you seen The Adjustment Bureau?
Yeah, but I only vaguely remember it. I actually googled it.
I love that movie. I did
to remind myself of the plot.
Yeah, it's a really good departure from some of his others, because obviously you've got the sort of futuristic style of Total Recall with Mars interplanetary stuff. You've got Minority Report talking about precogs and predicting murders and things like that. But the Adjustment Bureau effectively is a love story. And about
it's almost still predetermination, though, isn't it? Like Minority Report. So they're but a little bit of destiny in there as well.
Okay. Yeah, but I think Emily Blunt and it's Matt Damon, I think, isn't it? Yeah, those two together. It's a really good film, with simple premises within it as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was written in 1954. So again, this is a long time ago for someone to be writing. I think it's simple yet complex at the same time, and that's the beauty of it. It's simple enough to understand, but it's still a fairly complex kind of scenario that he's created. I think, given the time when he wrote it, or in the 50s.
He's obviously got a lot of themes running through his head in terms of himself and oneself. Because Total Recall is just like, well, what makes you? Is it you or is it your memories?
Yeah, it's a big theme.
The replicants that are more human than human, which is the Tyrell tagline. But the one that is more human than human is Rachel, who's got memories again. And then what does make it, just because she's a robot, or an android, sorry, what does stop if she's got all the same emotions and functions and characteristics of a human? Well, what makes a human? Do you have to just have the biological workings, the organic parts to it, or can you recreate that?
Yeah. If you've seen Blade Runner 2054, 2047?
49.
I was looking at a date in the corner. Have you seen Blade Runner 2047? There's a scene where the next... Have I done it again?
2049.
Yeah, so I do think it's confusing as to whether they are meant to be half robot, half human, or whether they're meant to be just synthetic or lab grown humans.
They bleed, they eat as well, don't they? So there are some organic or biological functions going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, they withstood stuff. So there was no burning to Pris's hand when she put it in the boiling water.
Yeah.
Leon, when he puts in the cryogenic bit with the eyes, with the eye guy, he brings it out and there's nothing happened to the flesh. It hasn't frozen. So there's something. And obviously got the super strength. So,
They don't all have super strength, though.
Do they not? Well, yeah. Well,
when
even the pleasure model Pris had super strength.
Did she?
Well, she maybe not. She's a bit of a gymnast, and then she did
when you see
Golden Eye on the top move on him.
I did think that Famke Janssen. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
You see each of the replicants' kind of profiles, and they've got their statistics, their incept date, and their strength, and their mental abilities. And I don't know if you noticed, but their serial number is actually just a concatenation of all those numbers, or an amalgamation. Yep. So I said in the introduction that Philip K. Dick died a few months before Blade Runner was actually released, so we never got to see the finished work. But he was fortunate enough to see some of the footage, some of the special effects footage that they'd done. And it said that he was so blown away by what you saw, he actually turned to the special effects team and said, it's almost as if you saw what was in my head when I wrote the novel. Wow.
Yeah, they evidently showed him the scene in Jeff Sebastian's apartment. The worst part of the whole movie. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it just lowered the whole tone.
Do you think that the Jim Henson Puppet Show
was a bit weird, wasn't it?
It was just ridiculous. It's evidently, it's obviously just like some little people in costumes, and it just doesn't work. The fellow with the stupid, like the Pinocchio pirate captain thing, it didn't work, and it burst the bubble for a little bit for me. It brought me out of my immersion because it just looks so crap. And there's so many different things they could have done for that. Just thinking outside the box with the special effects they had at the time, there was no need for it. He's a toy maker, fine, but you just didn't need those two little bits of comic. You didn't need the Jar Jar Binks or the Ewoks in that scene. Yeah. You just didn't need.
What I thought was really good.
I agree.
What I thought, one of the things that really resonates with me about the movie generally is you've got a movie made released in 1982, and we're watching it now. And there isn't much from a technological point that you sit there and you go, that's really dated badly. It's done in quite a special way, that it's talking about sort of the darkness of society, and there's spaceships flying overhead, but really they're just the police cars or the advertising hoardings with nice product placement. And there's not much, the intercom and stuff is the sort of thing you'd expect now, but there's nothing you're looking at and you're thinking, oh, that they thought that would be technologically advanced, and now it looks really quite remedial. Everything sort of feels quite fresh still, which is pretty impressive.
There were some bit like all computers, like in Alien as well. So Alien's even more in the future than Blade Runner's 2 years ago, isn't it? But they're all like BBC micros with like green text on the screen. They're using all of those. And then in Leon's apartment, there's like a black and white TV. It's off, and like with a portable aerial on top to plug in the back. And you think, well, in the future, which it was then, the amazing far future of flying cars, your telly still wouldn't be that big cube with an aerial that he's got to lean out the window and hold to get a reception on his telly.
Did you like the Easter egg, the Aliens Easter egg?
I didn't notice one in there. I know I've heard in the past that obviously there's Dallas who on his profile in Alien says something about Tyrell Corporation, or he's worked for Tyrell Corporation.
Oh, right, okay. I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking when Gaff's flying the police vehicle.
Yeah.
It comes up on the screen. It says Purge in red. I think it's red with a white reference. That's taken completely out of a scene in, is it Alien or Aliens, Dave? You'll probably know better than I. I can't remember which. I think it's Aliens. When I think Ripley's escaping on the ship. But apparently that's the exact same copy of the screen on her computer.
So it was linking again for almost linked to Ridley Scott. So Ridley Scott did Alien. James Cameron did Aliens. James Cameron also did The Terminator. And there's a bit where it popped in my head watching Final Cut, and it didn't happen during the theatrical version, where Deckard's chasing Zora through the streets, and she cowers down, and is it the stairs going down into a subway or something? She's cowering out the way, and he's just coming through, and he can kind of see her, and he's getting closer, and she's got no idea. She's looking left and right. And when she finally sees him, he draws his gun across to her. She's got like a blue light on her face or something. And for a second, I flash back to like Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor in Tech Noir.
Right, yeah.
And like when Arnie actually trains the gun on her, and the next thing you got Michael Biehn spinning up the sawn-off shotgun. But for a second, I'll have to watch it again. And you guys just watch that bit. And it was just it. And for a second, she even looked a bit like Linda Hamilton. In it, it was almost like Deckard was like terminating her, and she's the more human character because she's just trying to escape now.
What was your thoughts on Sean Young's performance and the kind of connection between the two actors in terms of the performance? Did you think it was convincing as a love story between the two of them?
When they've actually connected, so the first physical romantic connection, I was floored with how awkward and out of the feeling of the rest of their relationship in the movie and the feeling of the movie. It felt like 80s Bond when it was okay because it was a baddie woman, and I'm going to throw the moves on her as James Bond, and if it takes a little bit of force but she comes around in the end, then it's okay. It was absolutely just inappropriate, and I didn't see that. I didn't place it. However, it does seem to tie into later on, and it throws a few questions up there because when he's telling her to say things, isn't he? He's saying, "Tell me to kiss. Tell me you
want me or something.
Tell me you want me." And so it's like he's programming a type of behaviour, which is it's almost like mental abuse, isn't it? But he's programming a type of behaviour. Then at the end, when he goes back to the apartment after Gaff's been there, and he thinks she's dead in bed and pulls back the quilt, and he's so happy that she's alive. He says to her, "Do you love me?" And she says, "I love you." Not yes, I love you. Almost like the program he'd done previously. And then, "Do you trust me?" Not yes, I trust you. So it's a repeat of when he put words in her mouth in the previous scene, which almost says to me, she's just looking for a way out. And it kind of unraveled the whole connection between them to me a little bit.
In that awkward scene where he's sort of saying, like, forcing his ideas on her, he says, I think, 3 different things to her, which she repeats back. But I don't think he says, put your hands on me, which is what she then says.
Yeah, I picked that up in the final cut. I need to watch the original again because I didn't. I was very aware when I heard that bit that he didn't tell her to say that, but I didn't pick up on anything of that in the original theatrical version. So I'm going to have to watch the theatrical again.
Yeah, I think it's the same in that I think that I assumed or took from it that yes, he was being quite forceful. Yes, she was repeating things back, but this was something she actually then volunteered. So, but I mean, I don't like that kind of idea anyway of sort of, winning somebody round in that kind of really kind of forceful way.
He makes a fist,
it's not a comfortable
slams the door like that, and he pushes her against the block, like forces her. Where when it first was happening, the first millisecond, I thought it's playfulness, and you're going to get like a wry smile from her, and he's just straight on her, and it didn't fit. It didn't fit with him.
It's quite shocking, isn't it? It doesn't really fit in the tone of the movie. Now,
is it him just thinking it's a replicant? Is it him trying to say to himself, it's just a robot?
There's a document in the documentary, I think it was Dangerous Days. They show some outtakes of other things that they tried in that romantic scene, and it didn't work for whatever reason or another. There was like, you'll laugh. There was one version where they basically oiled her up, and he kind of had her up against the wall, and he kind of got her legs and wrapped them around him, and the legs were all slippy and oily, and it just
whilst they play Unchained Melody in the background.
I don't know. I don't think the connection between Rachel and Deckard works particularly well. And that could be intentional because she is a replicant and he may be a replicant. And that might be an intentional thing where they may not either be particularly great at expressing emotions or even necessarily feel emotions. But when you understand that Harrison Ford really didn't like Sean Young and didn't get on with her particularly well, it may have just been a kind of directorial trick to kind of get away with the actual lack of spark that they had on screen.
Right.
That makes sense.
In the end scene with Roy Batty, he does a funny change in look at Deckard. There's a moment where he sort of looks at him and then he goes, and then he decides he's going to die rather than kill Deckard, if you see what I mean. And it's almost as if he's looked in his eyes and he's seen, oh my God, you're one of us. But I don't know if that's true, but there's so many different nuances to that whole exchange, really. I find go on, sorry.
I felt like Roy had made the decision not to kill him earlier than that final interchange between them where he saves him from falling off, because he could have done. And it's almost like Roy's teaching him a lesson. Roy's writing his final, it's his final scene, isn't it? And he's just trying to impart various things. And Deckard, there's a bit where Deckard hits him. He's like, that's the spirit, when he hits him with his metal pole. And he kind of, he wants to kill him at first for vengeance. And Pris is there and he's very upset. And then I don't feel the decision was made in that very last few seconds on that rooftop where he pulls him up and decides, well, it's me, not you. I think he made that decision, good few minutes earlier in this sort of chase scene.
Yeah. Well, it was like he made. I think he explicitly stated it at one point, didn't he? That he was talking about fear, what it's like to live in fear, and it was almost as if he was toying with him and getting him to the point of, I'm going to die. There's no hope here. I'm going to die, and then he saves him. And he says, you've now experienced the sort of fear that we as replicants experience. Go and live your life. As a human, you can now live your life better, having appreciated what us as replicants have gone through or go through. And
it's his last testament, isn't he? He's kind of writing by his actions in those last few minutes.
Yeah, and
it's something very Shakespearean about Roy Batty, I think.
Yeah, and I think he played that part. He made up that last. I don't know where he got it from. I'm sure you'll have some more information, Dave. But he made up that last monologue, and they film Harrison Ford's reaction to what the heck is this guy saying? Anyway, the real life reaction, and that fit perfectly as well with this character. What I didn't quite understand is the whole 4-year lifespan thing. I was doing what I might normally do, doing the maths. It's set in November. He's got until the 6th of January 2020 technically to live, hasn't he? Or whatever. So he still had a month and a half, 2 months to live. So I'm not sure quite why it accelerated it for him.
Well, if it's like you're saying, Adam, where it's more sort of they're more human than you'd think than an android. Then it's less programming. It's more like a genetic thing. So I imagine it's quite hard to get it pinpointed on that 4-year mark for if it's genetics. Whereas if it was actual computers and circuit boards and wires, transistors and stuff, you just basically it could just be pop on that date. It just rolls onto that time sequence and it's over. But it was more of an organic shutdown, wasn't it? Which is more. It's more the genetics kicking in. That's what I thought anyway. Because I never understood why it's the beginning. It says November 2019, Los Angeles, November 2019. Yeah. And it's only like recently I've been like, because it's giving you you can work out the incept dates and when they're due to expire. Yeah. There's a lovely bit with Rutger Hauer as well. So he's chasing Harrison Ford through and he puts his head through the window. Yeah. And I forget what line he says to Harrison Ford, but then he just feels the rain on the side of his face and he kind of like smiles and then takes his head back inside again, and it's almost him realizing like this is it because there's no way to save me now. But he just appreciates feeling that rain, and it's a lovely like 3 seconds, and I don't know if it was improvised or if it was directed that way, but he says something to Deckard, feels the rain in his face, a little smile, and he just lingers there for a second and takes his head in, and I thought that was great. Little bits like that make the movie.
I saw an interview with Rutger Hauer where he said he very intentionally threw in lots of little flourishes like that to demonstrate that Roy Batty, as a replicant, coming towards the end of his lifespan, but becoming effectively emotionally mature in that respect, was kind of throwing in all these little bits and pieces that were showing he was finally appreciating what it really was to be alive, to be human, so to speak, to have a soul, to have fully formed emotions. So they were all ad-libbed. I think he did talk to Ridley Scott about what he planned to do, and he agreed with it. But it was all little touches like that, which made him feel more human and more rounded as a character, but just genius to watch.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the death scene on the rooftop, the tears in the rain. Not necessarily the speech. I mean, as Adam said, Rutger Hauer did ad-lib large sections of that, and it's amazing. But there's a fairly significant right at the end of that shot when he famously he releases a dove when he dies, and the dove flies up. Did you notice the difference between the theatrical release and the final cut in that sequence?
No,
I didn't. No, the theatrical release, it's just almost like a corrugated building, isn't it?
It just looks like an old, like a warehouse or something, doesn't it? Just like someone in an industrial building.
They cut it from the end of the Bon Jovi video.
And it's daylight. It's in stark contrast to the rest of the movie. Yeah. Whereas in the final cut, they actually like redid it properly with CGI. So it's a rainy, gloomy nighttime that the doves and the same kind of architecture that the doves flying up into. There's also a funny story about the dove scene itself.
David's funny stories.
It's not on a par with last week's funny stories about sticker books and stuff. But so he'd held that. It was his idea to hold the dove, actually. But he'd had that dove and they'd been on that rooftop in the rain for so long, shooting that dialogue. And by the time it got to the end of it, when he wanted to release the dove just dropped onto the rooftop and toppled off. It was so sodden, wet with water, it was incapable of flying. Right. So that was towards the end of the schedule. They were running out of time and money. So they ended up having to go and replicate that set inside in a soundstage or something and redo some of those shots. And it was only then, when the dove was inside, it wasn't soaking wet, that it actually took off at the end of the speech.
I like it. That's good.
David's funny stories.
So what themes or symbolism did you pick up on during the movie? And there's one really major one, and you've basically already alluded to it.
Identity? Mortality?
What is human? What makes you...
So I've made a few points. I've made a few notes. What makes a human, I would say, what is it? It's a soul, essentially, isn't it? It's the difference between an organic life and an actual human. It's having a soul, having real emotions, real memories, as opposed to implanted, actually having lived that experience. So that's certainly a theme. But there's one theme that is so heavily present throughout the movie, over and over again, in terms of imagery, and that's eyes. eyes are in this movie constantly. I think it opens with an eye. The
does,
owl's eye.
It opens with the shot flying over the city, doesn't it? Reflected in an eye with all those flames coming out of the columns.
When Roy kills Tyrell, he gouges his eyes out. Tyrell wears really thick glasses, which suggests that he's almost short-sighted. He hasn't thought through what he's actually created. Chew, the guy, he makes eyes. That's his job.
And that's all he makes. Yeah.
And Leon puts it on his shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. Eyes represent the window into the soul, don't they?
Yeah,
so there's that kind of connection as well. The line, "If you could only see what I'd seen with your eyes."
Mm-hmm.
Chris has got spray painted eyes. So all these things constantly, and even in Blade Runner 2049 as well. And
I was going to say it resonates in that.
Yeah. So it's about eyes just constantly. Had they had enough time and funding to complete Ridley Scott's actual original vision of the movie, it turns out that Tyrell himself was a replicant.
Right, okay.
So the real original Tyrell is in the next floor up in the pyramid, dead in this futuristic sarcophagus. And what happens is Roy would have murdered Tyrell, gouged his eyes out, then gone up to the next level, only to see the real Tyrell dead in this sarcophagus, knowing therefore that effectively what he's just done is irrelevant anyway, because the real guy's dead and no one can help him. Okay, so I just wanted to move on to talk about the effect that Blade Runner's had on culture since it was released. And I guess also wrap into that same question, what did Blade Runner get right about its vision of the future, and what did it get wrong?
Everyone would be using BBC Micros in all parts of their life.
Yeah.
And it would just be green characters on a screen forever.
Yeah. Yeah, so video calls,
calling.
Although obviously you're restricted to actually standing in a booth or, where it was fixed to a wall. So you're not like we've got now, we can walk around using there was no mobile devices that I recall that they had, like communicators or whatever, which Star Trek predicted in the 60s, I think it was. There's that line that Gaff says, somebody mentioned it earlier, which is again is a hint that Deckard's a replicant, which is you've done a man's job, sir.
Yeah.
Suggesting he's not a man, an organic, a real man. Now, in earlier versions of the script, and there's a soundbite of it somewhere in a documentary that I watched, in earlier versions of the script, the actual full line, which he would have said, was, "You've done a man's job, sir, but are you sure you are a man?" Which is kind of like, it's going beyond hinting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's still a hint, but it's a much bigger kind of finger pointing than the actual line that ended up in it.
Well, it's one of the biggest sort of direction towards it by someone who doesn't know if he's a replicant or not is that Rachel line, isn't it? Have you ever taken the test yourself? Then it lingers in silence, and everyone's going and thinking, "Why is he quiet?" But as soon as you see him asleep with like the vodka balanced on his chest, you forget kind of about the way your mind was taking that question, and then you just move on, don't you?
I was imagining it's Sambuca. That must just be me. Because I'm quite partial to Sambuca.
That's another thing, attention to detail as well, when he's having the drink in the bar just before the snake stripper comes on, and he takes a sip and he gets the maggot. Sorry, the worm, isn't it? It's like a tequila worm out of his mouth. Puts it down, and you got all the little tequila, the worms in the bottom of the tequila glass.
In terms of the influence that the Blade Runner's had, as I said in the introduction, I wanted to talk about Back to the Future too. Actually, it was on my list of things. I mean, because it's basically Blade Runner Light, isn't it? Back to the Future.
Yeah, well, like as I was saying before, Fifth Element's like Blade Runner Light as well. Yeah.
And did you think? I remember making a note when I watched it last week that the cars in Blade Runner, they really reminded me of Johnny Cabs in Total Recall.
The one car that reminded me of the Johnny Cab was JF Sebastian's car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember writing Johnny Cab as a note when I was watching it. Okay, so as you mentioned earlier on, you mentioned Sing Tao beer, which he orders, I think, when he's at the noodle bar, is it, in the start?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So, I mean, I wanted to just talk about again, another note that I made when I was watching the movie was, the use of the billboards. you know, it's
Yeah.
necessary in building a kind of believable world, but it is quite clearly also product placement, and both in the original movie and also in the sequel as well.
Yeah.
So I did a little bit of research into this, and I found out that there's an actual thing now that they call the Curse of Blade Runner, which is that most of those brands that appeared on those billboards in the original movie subsequently went bust. So Pan Am.
Do you want some of them? Right, you tell me. These are ones I noticed, Dave.
Okay,
Pan Am, obviously, you said about there.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola didn't.
Yeah.
Cuisinart?
Cuisinart, yeah, they make food processors.
They're still around. I recognise the name.
Yeah, they're still around. Yeah.
Atari.
Yeah, Atari is a kind of Atari technically went bust, but it's like it's like BlackBerry. They're about to release a new phone. They don't really exist anymore, but somebody bought the name. So Atari as a brand still exists, but the real Atari company did go bust. Yeah.
Denny's. I remember that they were around in the 90s still. Denny's.
I didn't see Denny's.
Yeah,
I don't remember
Denny's.
Denny's.
Yeah, watch your back.
Oh.
Yes.
Not me.
Is it Bullover? The watches? They're still around.
Sure.
Are they like luxury watches?
Yeah.
Not Bullover. What's the brand? I'm trying to think.
You're thinking of Bulgari, aren't you?
Bulgari, yeah. Was that in there?
Bullover was in there.
Oh, right. I don't know.
Budweiser.
Yeah.
RCA.
So RCA, Curse of Blade Runner.
Yeah. TWA.
Transwestern Airlines, yeah, that's mentioned as one of the hoverports, isn't it?
Is it? Okay. So yeah, RCA, you mentioned RCA no longer existed by 1986. They were bought by General Electric, ceased to exist. And there was another one in their Bell phones. I assume that's when he was making his video call. They became AT&T not long after the movie was released. So that's it. That's brands in Blade Runner.
We haven't really touched on. It's a big subject, but just the score, Vangelis. It was. That's another aspect that just makes the movie the great thing it is. It just, I think, it frames it really well. It bringing, the kicking in the beginning, and you've got these sort of, I don't know if they're minors or minor sevenths used in it, just to create a little bit of feeling of uneasiness, and then the notes are resolved, and then you've got like what the police use, like the suspense chords, where they need to be resolved as well, and it's lovely and melodic, but there's these bits of uneasiness that need to be resolved, and then it goes somewhere else as well. And using that electro style to it as well, like the electro synth, it just. Yeah. I think it's transcending. It takes you somewhere. It takes you somewhere else, and that's another engaging part of the movie. As soon as I start watching it and I hear that, I feel taken into it, which I really, really liked about it. The worst thing about the score was probably, the Lethal Weapon saxophone bit, which we talked about before, which sounds a bit like Too Good to Be True, didn't fit in with the style. Yeah. And then the outro as well. So the credits roll. And you've got
I love that tune, that like proper
ace, isn't it? It's just
at the end, yeah.
It's just it fits really well. So it fits with end credits. It's just just a sublime job.
Tell you a funny story about when I went to see Blade Runner 2049.
Funny stories.
So I was working in London, as I was week in, week out at that time. And it was towards the end of Blade Runner's theatrical run, and I knew if I didn't get to see it, I was going to miss it in the cinema. So I was in, can't remember the part of London I was in. I can't remember the exact name of the cinema I went to, but it was close to the Emirates Stadium, Arsenal. So I walked to the cinema that night from the hotel. It was an Odeon, I think.
Funny stories.
It was an Odeon. Other cinemas are available. Went to the desk, bought my ticket, looked around, noticed there was fellas standing around in tuxedos and earpieces and stuff, and thought, going on here, because it wasn't there was no red carpet.
Were you at the premiere, Dave?
Well, let's find out when I tell you the rest of the story.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there was, like I said, there was guys in tuxedos and in earpieces, burly fellas standing around looking like they were, monitoring something. So I went up to the screen, sat down, and I thought, this is weird, what's going on? So I was kind of, when you start trying to Google something, you're trying to think out what search term I'm gonna use to try and work out what's going on. So I Googled basically the name of the cinema that I was at and premiere, because I got the idea that something was happening. And it turned out that there was some movie that had been made about Arsenal, the year when they basically won the title on the last day by beating us. And it turns out that the premiere of that movie was happening at exactly the same time in that cinema when I was there watching Blade Runner 2049. Dave's funny stories.
Do. Next week, Dave buys cheese.
Joe, it's funny. It's funny you should say that. They did London Film Festival on the Move years and years ago. I think when we were all about 20 years old, 1920. Not 1920, 19 or 20 years old. They decided I think 2 of the films or 3 of the films were going to be at the Showcase Cinema in Liverpool, and I remember somebody getting me and somebody else some tickets, and we went to see I think it was Out of Sight with George Clooney, and I want to say, is
J-Lo.
it Kate Winslet?
J-Lo.
J-Lo, yeah. And it was directed by Steven Soderbergh. And I had somewhere else I needed to be straight after the movie, and I didn't realize that it was this kind of quite important thing. So I was sat at the back with someone, and we watched the movie, and it was a brilliant movie, and everyone clapped at the end. And I thought that was a bit strange to clap at the end of the movie. So as they announced Steven Soderbergh to come out to talk about his movie, me and this person just walked down and see ya, we've got somewhere else to be, and we left. And I was only about 2 days later, I was like, Steven Soderbergh was talking about his movie. I just went, I'm going to the pub. True story.
Okay. So we're going to wrap up the discussion on Blade Runner now by giving our individual ratings for the movie. And we're going to be giving our ratings against the final cut version of the movie. We've got 2 types of ratings on the Great Movie Show. We've got the popcorn rating and we've got the critics rating. Popcorn rating is essentially how much you enjoy the movie. Is it a bit of a guilty pleasure, something you put on at the end of a hard day? Throw in some Kenny G, have a bath. So the popcorn rating is how much you personally enjoy the movie, whereas the critics rating is your understanding of exactly how much of a great movie it is from a technical perspective. So starting off with you, Lloyd, what would your popcorn rating be for Blade Runner Final Cut?
It's a very good film. So popcorn rating is like my personal enjoyment, isn't it? Regardless of whether it was a classic or just your run-of-the-mill Dumb and Dumber or Something About Mary. So my popcorn rating would be still pretty high. Say, it's a little bit heavy go. It's either an 8 or an 8.5. 8.5, because I could watch it again when I get the opportunity again without being interrupted. I could watch it again and again. I like Harrison Ford's performance in it. 8.5. I'm going to go for.
Okay, Adam.
Slightly controversial. Mine's going to be a 7 for a popcorn rating. It doesn't interfere with my critics rating, which will come up in a moment. But it's not a film that I'd put on too many times. I appreciate the spectacle that it is, but from a popcorn personal perspective, 7 for me.
Okay. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 from a popcorn rating. I know it's not the easiest movie to watch, but for me, it's a movie. If I give it the chance, the time of day to actually sit and focus on it, then I find it an extremely enjoyable experience. So that's why I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
So better than Die Hard?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's probably why I took so long to watch Die Hard and why I've seen Blade Runner 10, 15 times.
Cool.
You know, slightly more kind of thinking man's movie, I suppose. Thinking man's compare. Okay, so moving on to the critics' rating, Lloyd, how would you rate it?
Oh, it's not going to get a full vote because I don't like a few little bits. I don't like the unicorn memory. I think it just muddies the waters too much. You know, if their intention is for him to be a replicant, then the unicorn memory is saying he definitely is. I don't like that. I like it's make up your own mind about what's going on. But it's a great movie. It's a classic movie. It's almost what Ridley Scott wanted it to be. When we're talking about the final cut without the voiceover and everything, but it's still not quite there. But I'm going to say for its time, for the special effects, the soundtrack, the story, the acting, 4.5.
Okay,
is my critics' rating.
Adam?
I'm exactly the same. My critics' rating is 4.5 stars. It's pretty close to being a cinematic masterpiece for what it is trying to achieve. If you said, how can you make the best sci-fi movie you can make? I don't think you'd be far off with Blade Runner. I don't think it's quite a film masterpiece of itself against all the genres. Which is the only reason why I'll drop down 0.5 star. I'm sure as the weeks go on, you'll wonder how I put it as 4.5 when I might give another film 5 stars. But for me, I think
American
it's almost there. It's almost there. So I'd give it 4.5 stars.
Okay. I just wanted to mention before I give my rating that the popcorn ratings were out of 10, whereas the critic ratings are out of 5. In case it sounds like we're giving Blade Runner 4.5 out of 10 for a critics rating. So the critics ratings are out of 5. I'm going to keep mine short and sweet, similar to what both of you have already said. I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5. I think it's an amazing movie. I love it. I think it's really well made. I can't think of any movies that I would give a 5 out of 5 to. That's just the way I am. So 4.97 if needs be, but I'm giving it 4.5. It's as close to a perfect movie as you can get, in my opinion.
Yep.
Roll titles.
Now it's Pop Quiz Hotshot.
Okay, this is the part of the show when we get to know a little bit more about one of our hosts. This week, it's Adam that I'm going to be asking the questions to. So you ready, Adam?
Hello. I am indeed.
Okay. So these questions might be familiar from anyone that saw last week's episode. So the first question is, what was the first film you saw in the cinema?
The first film that I saw, but I don't remember seeing at the cinema, was E.T. Being a similar age to Lloyd, perhaps unsurprising, that was the first movie. The first movie I remember seeing at the cinema was Return of the Jedi. I'd seen the first 2 films on VHS or even possibly terrestrial telly, and they were so important to me. I thought they were such brilliant films that when I actually got to see Return of the Jedi on the cinema, I actually thought for a while that was my favorite. I think maybe for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, I thought that Return of the Jedi was the best of the 3. I'm sure that many people have different debates. I'm quite happy now that Empire Strikes Back is the best movie out of those 3, probably followed by Star Wars and then Return of the Jedi. But being, like a 4 or 5-year-old kid, possibly even younger, going to see Return of the Jedi, having understood, I think at the time, some of the main issues in the film, maybe not the big sort of familial issues, and then just the fact that there were Ewoks and what was happening with them was something that kids really liked. And so all of the things now that we hate about the remakes with like Jar Jar Binks and things like that, actually they're in it for a reason. and the Ewoks were a reason why I really liked it as a kid. So I think Lloyd joked last week even about Caravan of Courage or Battle of Ferendor. I watched those movies. I rented those VHS movies. Yeah. Exactly. I really, really enjoyed it. Probably in the scheme of things, they were not very good movies, but yeah, I remember that definitely being a movie that I came out of really having enjoyed. There was just something about Star Wars, and I'll come to it later when you ask me the obvious question. But that's what I remember as the first movie I went to. I've been told many a time that I came out of E.T. crying my eyes out on my dad's shoulder, but I don't have any recollection. I love E.T. I've seen it many, many, many times at home, but I don't remember being in the cinema watching it once.
Give us a movie fact or Easter egg.
I'll give you both. I'll give you a movie fact only because I read this yesterday, I think. Sharon Stone's got a new book out, and she's referenced the fact that when she was producer on The Quick and the Dead, do you remember the sort of Western that she was the star in? TriStar Pictures were impressed with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I think he'd just got a nomination for an Oscar for What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And she was really impressed with him. And they said, well, if you want him, you can pay his wages. So she did. So the reason he's in that movie is because Sharon Stone paid his wages. In terms of an Easter egg, one that I really like is in Trading Places, Dan Aykroyd's character, Lewis Winthorpe, the third, he's arrested towards the start of the movie, and he has, like the plate, the prison number or whatever, the arrest number, and that arrest number is the same number as Joliet Jake Blues had from the Blues Brothers, which was played by John Belushi. Both films were directed by Ivan Reitman. Dan Aykroyd was in both, and in fact, there's a couple of other layers in relation to that, but basically the number, it's something like 7474505B on the Joliet Jake Blues one, but actually it looks like they got it wrong for Dan Aykroyd's character on Trading Places, and actually it's an 8 rather than a B. Wow. There's another movie as well that Dan Aykroyd's in. I can't remember what it is. I think Crazy Like Us or something like that with Walter Matthau. Where he's also got a prison number, and it's the same one as the original, but actually has the B rather than the 8. The reason I like that whole Easter egg is that Dan Aykroyd was in Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, and when he wrote Ghostbusters, he wrote it with Peter Venkman effectively being Eddie Murphy. He wrote it for Eddie Murphy, and also he expected John Belushi to be in that movie as well. So I like the sort of link between Eddie Murphy and John Belushi and Ghostbusters and Dan Aykroyd. And another fact associated with that as well, apparently, is that they wanted Slimer to look like John Belushi.
I was waiting for you to finish. I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, and apparently the guy who designed it said, yeah, I'll make it exactly like him. Didn't do anything different, didn't redesign it at all. And they were like, it's amazing. He looks just like John Belushi. And he was like, my work here is done.
He's an ugly little spud.
And apparently, obviously, the reason why he wasn't in Ghostbusters was because John Belushi passed away from a drug overdose, I think. But Eddie Murphy wasn't in it because he thought it sounded like a croc.
Next question, Adam. First movie soundtrack you bought?
This is a little embarrassing. Armageddon.
For the Aerosmith classic.
I don't even know really why I bought it. I mean, I like the film, Michael Bay classic.
I know why you bought it.
I think it was...
so you just go, there's a really emotional bit in this movie. Let me just put the CD on.
I think I quite liked just. I always remember on the film. I always remember on the film there was that terrible bit with Ben Affleck when he was he's going the Animal Channel, and he tried to be Australian on Liv Tyler's tummy. And she, here in the undergrowth, the giraffe attacks. and it's terrible. But it's like some sort of like acoustic version of "Don't Want to Miss a Thing" in the background, which was doubly weird because it was Liv Tyler's dad singing as she was just about to embark on something.
No. Bruce Willis is a dad, not Steven Tyler.
Yeah. Do you know what?
In real life,
Steven Tyler wasn't sold at first, so this may or may not be true. Again, it's one of my facts that are always dubious.
Lloyd's facts.
They showed the scene to Steven Tyler where it's basically from the real scene from the movie where Bruce Willis's feed's about to cut out, and she goes, "Dad," and puts a hand on the TV screen wherever she's watching, like in NASA. Because obviously Steven Tyler's her dad, and he just got that emotional link with it. He goes, "Yeah, I'll do it," and that's why they put the song for the movie. True story.
Excellent. I always like Chantal Krasovic's "Leaving on a Jet Plane" rather than the original by John Denver. I think that's probably why I bought the album, but I have no idea why. But probably for the reason Lloyd gave earlier.
Right, Adam. Next question is first 18 film you watched.
Enter the Dragon.
Is that an 18?
Yeah, at the time it was considered to be ultra violent. I'm not sure whether that was slightly superseded by an older VHS of The Octagon, starring Chuck Norris. But yeah, I remember very, very young, I used to sneak to watching any martial arts film I could possibly find on terrestrial telly, and the BBC used to play things like Enter the Dragon at like 11 o'clock at night. And I remember, I don't know what it was, but something about John Saxon's character in that I thought was quite cool. Not just Bruce Lee's character. And I've watched that film probably 50 times since. I probably saw that when I was about 9 or 10. So yeah, that's the first 18 certificate film I watched.
So Adam, what's the first film or TV show that made you cry?
Okay, I'll stay with film. First one that I'm told made me cry, as I said earlier, was E.T. The first film that I remember crying in was The Neverending Story, when Artax, the horse, died in the Swamp of Sadness. I think.
That is sad. That is really sad.
And I remember being I remember being disturbed by that, and it wasn't until obviously the end of the movie where it's like everything's resurrected because it moves on and Atreyu's off riding Artax again.
Falcor, Atreyu, Falcor.
It was the first movie that, and weirdly, because I think I was very, very young, that and Gremlins were the first two films that I had on VHS. I think those two, and possibly Santa Claus the movie with John Lithgow and
Dudley Moore.
Who else? Dudley Moore, yeah. Were the first three films on VHS that I had. So I watched Neverending Story quite a lot. First film that I remember really sort of deeply being upset about, though, was Boys in the Hood. And Ricky, obviously a linebacker or something like that, is Trey's mate.
Dreams he's going to go to college and get a spot.
But the weird thing was, but the thing was, and this is the thing that made me feel that maybe like a bit older when I was watching it. I don't think I cried necessarily when he was killed in the movie. I think I cried, when they brought his body back to his mum, and it was the same time she had the delivery of the test results, and he needed some like 700 on his SATs to get his football scholarship. And basically she opens it and he's got like 710. So he would have got his his American football scholarship, but he was shot dead. I remember that just absolutely flooring me as a movie. So that's the thing I sort of remember most being emotionally affected by, despite the earlier incidents of Neverending Story and E.T.
Okay. Who do you think is the best Bond?
Sean Connery. I think Sean's iconic. I think Sean, as far as I'm concerned, Sean Connery is James Bond. I think everyone else has been a different version of him. I still think that Goldfinger is probably the ultimate Bond film from what was written by Fleming. You know, you've got Auric Goldfinger, you've got, you know, a proper heist, you've got, you know, the henchman that is Oddjob. I mean, there's so many classic details that's the main one that's been copied by, you know, Austin Powers with Random Task and things like that. You know, and do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. Things like that.
You know, that was going to be a circular saw.
Yeah, was it laser beam?
They changed it for a laser beam, didn't they? It was originally going to be a circular saw. I think one of you two told me that.
But do you know the interesting thing about James Bond is that I remember my mum hating it because it was so loud whenever they did the action moments. The music seemed to be cranked up 3 times louder than anything else. And I kept having to be... I had to be told to turn the volume down. Yeah, I had to turn the volume down every single time. But,
okay, so the next question, Adam, is who do you consider to be the most underrated actor?
Actually, a female actor who is really, really good is Michelle Rodriguez. I think that she doesn't necessarily get the roles that she should have. Perhaps slightly pigeonholed by being in all the Fast and Furious movies. But if you watch like Girl Fight or more recently Widows, don't know if you've both seen that. She's absolutely brilliant actress. But I suppose one that I think that doesn't get the plaudits that he should get, perhaps, is Sam Rockwell. I think Sam Rockwell for me is an actor, you know, Al Pacino or Robert De Niro. I think he's absolutely fantastic. I'd like to say Lloyd, but no.
Isn't that who you said, Lloyd?
Yeah, I said it, and then I think Adam went, no, just have one, just have one.
I suppose if it wasn't for the series Billions, Paul Giamatti would be up there for me as being an actor that I think is quite underrated.
Sideways, very good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You tried to get me to watch that many a time.
Have you not seen it yet?
Still not seen it.
Oh, wow. So we can do it every time. Adam hasn't seen something.
I've seen it. But, I've seen it. Can you believe it? I've seen it.
Oh, high five.
So, yeah, I'd say Paul Giamatti.
Okay, Adam, the next question is, name a featured song or soundtrack that resonates with you. And you can't say Armageddon.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would be a liar if I didn't say that the soundtrack that I've listened to most over the years is completely incongruous compared to my filmic knowledge, and that's Dirty Dancing.
I was going to say that. Damn it! I wish I'd preempted that now.
My sister watched that film almost non-stop and listened to the soundtrack many times in her bedroom, and I can remember every single song, and I've watched the film lots and lots, and I don't know whether it's an indoctrination or not, but that's probably a guilty pleasure. I very much like that as a soundtrack. In terms
time of my life.
In terms of scores or sort of general compositions, anything by John Williams always resonates with me. I'm quite a Spielberg fan, as you know. Superman, Star Wars, they all have something different, but there's still something that's integrally John Williams that runs through all of the scores. But in terms of a single song, and Dave, I think you'll probably agree with me on some levels on this, as a single song, the John Spence blues explosion with bell bottoms at the start of Baby Driver is possibly one of my favorite starts to a film ever. That from start to finish, Edgar Wright has fashioned his action around the movement and the beat of that song from the very first note to the very end. And I don't even know to this day whether I like Baby Driver as a film, because I just assume that it's a perfect film because before those titles rolled, I just and I think that as a modern film is one of my favorite films, possibly because of that opening number. So I'd say as a single song, probably Bell Bottoms from Baby Driver.
Okay. Adam, what's your favorite movie set piece?
I was thinking about this from Lloyd being asked, because I actually wrote, I think, that question couple of weeks ago for Lloyd.
Yeah.
I don't think I really knew what I was asking with it. Did I mean a huge action sequence? Did I mean something that was sort of twee that just impressed me very much? You know, am I talking about, you know, the car chasing Bullet? Am I talking about the
That was going to be my guess for yours.
Was it?
I swear to God. I need
was
to
I
start
was I
saying
talking about
like just
was I talking about, you know, the Dark Knight Batpod chase, or is it something as simple as, you know, Merry Christmas Emporium in the end of It's a Wonderful Life? But
Can I have one more guess before you say it? Can I have one more guess?
Go on.
Steve McQueen, The Great Escape, on his bike, jumping over
do you know what? The reason why I've chosen the one that I have is because it's so different to the sort of thing that I'd like to project as a movie fan. And it's a real guilty pleasure, but it's also there's a second level to it, which hopefully will make sense. My guilty pleasure favorite set piece is actually Tango and Cash. The start of the movie, when Sly Stallone parks his car across the highway and the truck comes towards it, and he takes his gun and he empties out the bullets and puts a new set of 6 bullets, spins the barrel and then aims it at the truck and fires it, and then basically they put on the brakes and the two guys in the truck come flying out and they're landing at his feet, and he says, you know, do the honors or cuff yourself. I remember that as an opening scene to a movie, an action movie, being, to me, absolutely perfect. And I was gutted because I watch quite a lot of foreign films and martial arts films particularly. I'm a fan of Jackie Chan. And for some reason, I hadn't seen Police Story. And I watched Police Story about 6 or 7 months after I first saw Tango and Cash. And that scene is an absolute carbon copy, an exact, almost moment-to-moment copy of a scene in Police Story where Jackie Chan does exactly the same, I think, with maybe a bus rather than a truck. But it is almost perfectly the same. So my favorite set piece is a copy of a previous set piece, but it's
how did they make it better, Adam? How did they make that scene better?
Because it had Sly Stallone in.
And he goes and he shoots the tanker and goes and says what?
Oh, look, it's snowing.
Yeah. Winner.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
I'm going to shock you now. I'm not sure I've seen Tango and Cash. I might have seen it. I actually might have seen it. You know, I'm sure.
Ray Tango.
Is it Kurt Russell as well?
Ray Tango has cost me $7 quadrillion. Gabriel Cash has cost me 2,000. I hate them both equally, and I will seek vengeance both with equal pressure to both. It's like, all right, well, just take care of Ray Tango and just do whatever with Gabriel Cash.
Okay, thanks for that answer, Adam.
Pleasure.
Well, my next question.
Welcome.
Do you have a female movie crush?
My movie crush is Kelly LeBrock.
Isn't she like 70?
Yeah, I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about when I was younger. Because I remember when I was a kid, when I saw Weird Science for the first time, she was my idea of the perfect woman. Not my movie crush now, but certainly, yeah, from years gone by, Kelly LeBrock.
So next question, Adam, is what's your preference, Marvel or Star Wars?
Okay, so Star Wars. And the main reason for that is because I don't think I would have got into films as much as I did if it wasn't for the original Star Wars saga. I think I've watched those 3 films so many times that they sort of forged my view of cinema. And I suppose it means that I've not been so critical when I've watched, you know, the new films. Even when I've watched Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, I've still looked at that with the sort of golden age of, childhood cinema in my eyes. I think the Marvel movies are brilliant. I think modern classics. I think if you ask any kid who's like 7 or up now that's seen any of those films or seen the Star Wars films, without shadow of a doubt, they're all going to say the Marvel films. I think they're brilliantly made. I think they are of the time now. But when you think about industrial light and music, is that right? Industrial light and music? Magic.
Industrial light and magic.
Industrial light and music. When you look at
Just like that.
when you look at
Just like that.
when you look at industrial light and magic, and how they've developed from Star Wars and all of the groundbreaking stuff they've done, I don't think a lot of cinema and special effects would have been possible without Star Wars. So I suppose there's something in me that just says, yeah, I think ultimately I'm always going to prefer Star Wars. I love The Mandalorian. I think that's an attempt at bringing Star Wars more towards the Marvel thematic styling, but still trying to stay true to the Star Wars canon. There's a lot of stuff associated with Star Wars as well that we don't see because there's countless books and comics associated with it that explains more that the movies maybe have missed. And I think people have been annoyed by the constant tweaking of George Lucas to various scenes, such as the infamous "Who Shot First" with Han Solo,
and Han walking on Jabba's tail in the Mos Eisley just before they leave. It's just
exactly.
Well done, George.
But I think, but I think the thing that I looking back I liked about it is the fact that they used models, the fact that it wasn't shiny and new. Things were a little bit gritty. That things in the future or things in a galaxy far, far away, it wasn't just shiny new stuff. It was, this is people experiencing real things elsewhere. And I didn't think for a moment when I saw the first 3 films that anything wasn't real. You watch The Phantom Menace and everything's CG. It's obviously CGI. And they found a nice balance with those old movies, which they've lost a lot of that with the remake. I think when they've moved on to 7, 8, and 9, they've caught some of that again, and they've managed to capture some of that magic. But yeah, Star Wars.
Thank you for your comprehensive response. My blood is really pleased with you.
just go, man, just go.
Okay, so next question's a biggie for fans of 80s movies such as yourself. So the question is, Stallone or Schwarzenegger?
I'd say, and it's not an easy answer for me, actually. I'd say Stallone. The Rocky films, weirdly, more Rocky 3 and Rocky 4, even though Rocky and Rocky 2 are much better films. Those films were just part of my growing up. The montage training scene in Rocky 4 particularly was something that I watched over and over again. Background. Yeah, and I would rewind that and watch that over and over again, just that one scene, and keep watching it on repeat. And I remember the sort of the same thing resonating all the time, that it's, we know that he's not going to be a very good fighter until Adrian gets herself into the frame of mind that she's going to support him, and then it's going to all work out. But also, I think Stallone's other movies like Cliffhanger, Demolition Man, Over the Top, were all films that, as I was growing up, at the exact time that they were suited for me, just came about. Whereas I think Schwarzenegger's Predator and Terminator 2, I was a little bit older when I was enjoying them, so I think I'd already been blooded on Stallone. So I say sorry to Arnie, but Sylvester Stallone.
So the final question of this section is, name a film you've watched without knowing anything about it.
Get Out.
Well, now.
Yeah, good answer.
Get Out, which is Jordan Peele directed, and I only knew Jordan Peele from Key and Peele, and even then I hadn't really seen much by way of his comedy. So I didn't know what it was. I just remember somebody saying, you really need to see this film. It's an absolutely exceptional piece of filmmaking. I didn't know anything about the story. I didn't even I think I might have known that Daniel Kaluuya was in it. But I didn't know what role he had. I didn't know how significant he was, whether he was a major or a minor character. And actually, the reason why I mention it is I just think it's one of the best films that I've seen that I didn't have a starting point when I turned it on. I watched it on my own in the dark about 11 o'clock at night, probably the best and worst time to watch a film like that. And I was absolutely enthralled the whole way through.
So that's the end of this week's episode of The Great Movie Show. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'd like to remind you to like, subscribe, and click the notifications bell so that you receive a notification next time we upload a video. I'd like to remind you that the podcast is available on all popular podcast platforms. And if you are listening to the podcast, why don't you come over and check us out on YouTube or vice versa? Our socials will be listed in the description for the video. Thanks for watching this episode of The Great Movie Show, where we've been talking about Blade Runner. The next episode is going to be based around the 1975 Steven Spielberg classic Jaws. Just one more thing, I'd like to say thank you to Lloyd and Adam for joining me tonight.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Ladies.
And that's a wrap.